The Bordeaux remained untouched, $1,500 of accusations sitting in crystal on white linen. Elena Martinez checked her phone for the 47th time in 63 minutes, the screen's cold glow reflecting off the Patek Philippe that cost more than most people earned in a year. No messages, no calls, nothing from the investor Sarah had sworn would show. Around her, Meridian hummed with Friday night energy, all ambient lighting and hushed conversations punctuated by laughter that might have been genuine or might have been performance. Elena had stopped being able to distinguish authentic joy from strategic presentation somewhere around her second billion. The distinction seemed irrelevant when you spent most evenings alone in a 30-room mansion working through emails that never stopped coming. Problems that never stopped demanding solutions only she could provide. The sommelier approached with practiced deference, his expression carefully neutral, in the way service professionals learned when dealing with the obviously wealthy and the obviously stood up. Would she like the bottle package to take home? The question carried no judgment, but Elena heard it anyway. Another woman abandoned at a table for two, another evening, wasted. Waiting for someone who valued her time less than she'd hoped. She declined with a tight smile, reaching for her purse. What she wanted couldn't be bottled or purchased or delivered to her doorstep with same-day shipping. $11.2 billion couldn't buy a single evening where she was just Elena, not Martinez Energy's Ice Queen CEO, not the woman who'd revolutionized renewable storage and left competitors bleeding market share in her wake. Just a person who could sit across from someone and be seen, not calculated, not assessed for what she could provide or what advantage she might offer. The commotion erupted near the entrance before she could signal for the check loud enough to cut through Meridian's carefully cultivated atmosphere of refined dining. A man in his early 30s, dark hair slightly disheveled from what looked like a long day of actual work rather than executive meetings, stood negotiating with the hostess. His hand gripped a smaller one, a girl, maybe 6, with wide eyes taking in the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows and white tablecloths with the kind of wonder only children possessed, that capacity for joy. Uncomplicated by cynicism or calculation. His voice carried across the hushed conversations, deep and patient despite obvious disappointment. Just a quick dessert at the bar. It's her birthday, and I promised her the chocolate lava cake here. I know we don't have a reservation, but it's just dessert. We'll be quick. The hostess shook her head, genuinely apologetic, but firm in the way people were when they'd delivered the same refusal 100 times before. Friday nights at Meridian were booked 6 weeks out, a fact Elena knew because Sarah had pulled strings through the company's corporate account to secure tonight's reservation. The table for two that would sit half-empty, a monument to Elena's inability to maintain anything resembling a normal social life outside conference rooms and quarterly earnings calls. The little girl looked up at her father, and Elena watched something remarkable happen. The child's face didn't crumple into tears or twist with tantrum. Instead, she tugged at his hand, her small voice carrying clearly in the momentary lull between conversations. "It's okay, Daddy. We can try the bakery on Flatbush Avenue. They have chocolate cake, too." The disappointment shadowing that small face hit Elena like a physical blow, visceral in a way boardroom confrontations and hostile investor questions never were. She'd seen grown men collapse under less pressure than this child was handling. With quiet grace had watched executives twice her age lose composure over setbacks far less significant than a missed dessert. Something shifted inside her chest, a feeling almost foreign after years of ruthless business decisions and calculated risks that never involved actual human connection, never risked anything except money and market position. The words were out before she could think them through, before calculation could override impulse. "Excuse me. You can join me if you'd like." 3 heads turned, the hostess relieved, the father's surprise evident on features that suggested he wasn't accustomed to strangers offering kindness, the girl curiosity brightening her expression like sunrise. Elena stood gesturing to the empty chair across from her, to the untouched Bordeaux, and the single-place setting that screamed abandonment in a way no amount of expensive wine could disguise. "I have a table for two, and it seems my companion isn't going to show." The man hesitated, his eyes cautious in a way that spoke to experience with offers that came with strings attached with kindness that had prices not immediately visible. "That's very kind, but we wouldn't want to impose. You were expecting someone." Elena extended her hand, noticing his strong jawline, the kind eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners, the calluses on his palm when he shook her hand, evidence of work that involved more than keyboards and conference calls. "I'm Tori." The nickname emerged unbidden, unused since college, before Martinez's energy consumed her identity and transformed her into someone who existed primarily in business publications and shareholder reports, before the billions made her simultaneously famous and invisible, known by everyone but truly seen by no one. "James Cooper. And this is my daughter Lily." His handshake was firm, honest, unpretentious. "Are you sure we're not interrupting? You look like you were just leaving." "Absolutely sure. In fact, you'd be saving me from the embarrassment of dining alone after being stood up." The small vulnerability slipped out naturally, unplanned, a rare moment of honest admission from a woman who'd spent years guarding every expression, every gesture, every hint of weakness that competitors might exploit. Lily climbed onto the chair opposite Elena, her assessment thorough and unself-conscious in the way only children could manage, taking in everything from Elena's simple black dress to her minimal jewelry with wide-eyed interest unmarred by judgment or calculation. "Someone was mean to you. That's not nice." The indignation was sincere, a child's pure sense of justice untainted by the complexities Elena navigated daily, by the understanding that business wasn't personal, and that standing someone up might have been a strategic decision rather than simple rudeness. The directness of it, the genuine concern from a complete stranger too young to want anything from her, except perhaps chocolate cake, cracked something in Elena's carefully maintained armor. "No, it's not nice at all. But now I get to have dinner with you instead, and that seems like a much better evening." She meant it. The words flowed naturally, without the careful positioning that characterized every other interaction in her life, without the three-dimensional chess of considering how each statement might be interpreted, what advantage it might provide, or what weakness it might reveal. No agenda, no angle, just honest response to honest concern. James settled into the chair beside his daughter, gratitude and lingering uncertainty mixing in his expression as the hostess retreated with visible relief at having solved the problem without creating a scene. "This is unexpected. I promised Lily chocolate cake because she got a gold star in school today for her volcano project. The eruption worked perfectly. Didn't it, sweetheart?" Pride warmed his voice when he spoke about his daughter, the kind of uncomplicated love Elena rarely witnessed in her world of prenuptial agreements and trust funds, designed to protect assets from human weakness, from the messy complications of actual emotion. It was the pride of a parent who genuinely delighted in his child's achievements, not the strategic approval of someone cultivating a future business asset or social connection. Well, that certainly deserves a celebration. Elena caught the waiter's eye, gesturing for menus with the unconscious authority of someone accustomed to immediate service, to having her needs anticipated before she voiced them. As they arrived, she noticed James's slight grimace when he glanced at the prices, appetizers starting at $38, entrees climbing into triple digits, the kind of menu that existed to signal exclusivity rather than to actually feed people. Without missing a beat, she added, "This is my treat. I insist as a thank you for saving me from a lonely dinner. You'd be doing me a favor." The refusal was immediate, a matter of principle rather than politeness, the kind of automatic response that revealed character more clearly than any carefully prepared answer ever could. "We can't let you do that. That's incredibly generous, but my company has an expense account for client dinners. Since my client canceled, it would be a shame to waste it." The first lie slipped out easily, small and seemingly harmless, the kind of white lie that oils social interactions and prevents awkwardness. There was no client dinner, no legitimate business expense that would justify this meal. Just a blind date Sarah had arranged with an investment banker who'd apparently taken one look through Meridian's floor-to-ceiling windows at the notorious Elena Martinez and decided his Friday evening was better spent elsewhere. The bill would come from her personal account, a drop in an ocean of wealth so vast she'd stopped tracking the exact numbers years ago when adding another 100 million started feeling like rearranging deck chairs rather than actual achievement. James seemed to relax slightly, though dignity still straightened his shoulders, pride evident in the set of his jaw. All right, but only if I can leave the tip. I insist on that much. Elena nodded, admiring his insistence on contributing something, on maintaining his self-respect, even while accepting help. The gesture revealed more about his character than an hour of conversation could have. This was a man who understood the difference between accepting assistance and surrendering dignity, who knew his own worth regardless of the price tags on Meridian's menu. Lily was already engrossed in the children's menu, oblivious to the adult negotiations about money and pride playing out above her head. "Look, Daddy, they have mac and cheese shaped like stars. Can I get that? And can I color this?" She held up the menu's backside, which featured a maze and simple drawings designed to keep young diners occupied. Her excitement over something so simple, pasta shapes and crayons, struck Elena with unexpected force. Her own childhood had been filled with extravagance that quickly lost its luster, when you could have anything you wanted, when no desire went unmet for longer than it took to place an order or make a phone call. She'd learned early that unlimited resources didn't create happiness, just different categories of emptiness, more sophisticated forms of dissatisfaction. Of course, sweetheart. James's patient attention to his daughter, the way he actually listened to her chatter about pasta shapes and volcanoes, spoke to a kind of presence Elena rarely encountered in her world. "You can tell Tori all about your volcano while we wait for food." Dinner progressed with surprising ease, conversation flowing naturally in a way Elena's usual interactions never did. James explained he taught English literature at Lincoln High School in Brooklyn, had been there 8 years, coached the wrestling team, and advised the literary magazine. He spoke of his students with genuine affection, of watching kids discover Hemingway and Morrison and Baldwin, of helping teenage boys channel aggression into discipline on the wrestling mat, of the slow satisfaction of seeing comprehension dawn in eyes that had expected to fail. The passion in his voice when he discussed books was genuine, unperformed, so different from the calculated enthusiasm Elena encountered in boardrooms where executives performed interest in whatever might advance their careers. He quoted Hemingway on Grace Under Pressure and Baldwin on The Price of the Ticket. With the same natural ease other men quoted sports statistics, his world built on ideas and the slow, patient work of shaping young minds rather than quarterly earnings and market disruption. When he mentioned Lily's mother, pain flickered behind his eyes, old grief that time had made bearable but not erased. Lost her during childbirth. There were complications the doctors didn't catch in time. It's been just the two of us since Lily was born. The grief was visible but controlled, carried with the kind of quiet strength that suggested he'd learned to function around the wound without pretending it didn't exist. But when he looked at Lily currently explaining her volcano project with elaborate hand gestures that threatened to knock over water glasses, the love that transformed his face was so pure it made Elena's throat tighten unexpectedly. "She's my whole world. Everything I do is for her." The simplicity of that statement, the completeness of it, exposed how hollow Elena's own achievements felt in comparison. She'd built an empire, revolutionized an industry, accumulated wealth that could buy small countries. But she'd never been anyone's whole world, never inspired that kind of uncomplicated devotion, never felt the weight of another human being depending on her for anything, except quarterly returns and strategic vision. When Elena's turn came to share, she kept answers carefully vague, each word selected for what it revealed and what it concealed. Investment management, renewable energy sector. Just moved back to the city after traveling for work. Hours are pretty flexible, which is nice. What she didn't mention, Martinez Energy Solutions, the company she'd founded, in a cramped apartment 9 years ago, with nothing but a breakthrough in battery technology and relentless determination. The 11.2 billion valuation as of last quarter. The 3 homes she owned, the private jet waiting at Teterboro, the fact that she could buy Meridian without blinking if the whim struck her. That Business Weekly had called her the most formidable woman in tech, that competitors whispered her name with equal parts admiration and fear, that she'd spent the last 8 years proving every investor who'd doubted her catastrophically wrong. She didn't mention that she was Elena Martinez, that her face graced magazine covers, that her testimony before Congress on renewable energy policy had become a case study in effective advocacy, that she regularly received offers to speak at conferences for 6-figure fees she inevitably declined because her time was worth far more than that. For one night in this restaurant with this kind man and his adorable daughter, she was just Tori. A woman enjoying dinner without the weight of billions in market capitalization riding on her every decision. When Lily's chocolate lava cake arrived with a single candle, both Elena and James sang happy birthday, their voices blending in the traditional melody, while Lily's face lit with delight so pure it seemed to fill the entire restaurant. She made a wish with the solemnity only 6-year-olds could muster, eyes squeezed shut in concentration, before blowing out the flame with enough force to scatter sparks across the plate. "I'm not telling what I wished for, or it won't come true. That's the rule." Elena felt something long dormant stir in her chest, warmth spreading through regions that had been cold and calculating for so long. She'd forgotten what genuine feeling even resembled. This was joy untainted by strategy connection, uncontaminated by agenda. The simple pleasure of making a child happy without contracts or conditions or calculations about return on investment. James left a generous tip when they finished, more than Elena suspected he could comfortably afford, based on the modest watch he wore and the slightly frayed cuffs of his shirt, but she respected his need to contribute to maintain his dignity, even while accepting her hospitality. Outside Meridian, the spring evening wrapped around them, city noise, a distant hum on this quiet street, the moment suspended between the restaurant's warm glow and whatever came next. "Thank you again." James's sincerity touched something in Elena that expensive business dinners and society events never reached, penetrating defenses she'd thought impenetrable. This was really special. You saved Lily's birthday, and you saved my evening too. I was dreading having to see her disappointed. The vulnerability in that admission, the willingness to acknowledge fear of failing, his daughter revealed depths Elena wanted to explore further. Lily tugged on Elena's hand, small fingers warm against her palm, the physical contact startling in its simplicity. "Do you like playgrounds?" "We're going to the big one in Central Park tomorrow, the one with the castle." Hope brightened her eyes, the desire for another encounter so transparent it was almost painful to witness. Children didn't know how to hide their wants, yet hadn't learned the art of pretending indifference or strategic disinterest. James's gentle admonishment carried no real reprimand, just a father trying to teach social boundaries without crushing his daughter's spirit. Lily. "I'm sure Tori has plans. It's Saturday." Elena hesitated only briefly, the smart move clearly being to end this now, to walk away, before complications multiplied, before the gap between Tori and Elena Martinez became a chasm impossible to bridge without casualties. But looking at Lily's hopeful face, at James's warm smile, she couldn't make herself choose wisdom over want. "Actually, I don't have plans. What time will you be there?" Surprise gave way to genuine pleasure on James's face, the kind of uncomplicated happiness Elena rarely inspired in people who usually wanted something from her: business deals, investments, donations, connections, access to her world of wealth and influence. "Around noon, if that works?" "Perfect. I'll see you both then." She watched them walk away, James holding his daughter's hand, and felt that unfamiliar lightness again. Something she couldn't quite name, but recognized as dangerously close to simple happiness. The town car waited at the curb, James the driver holding the door with practiced efficiency. She made sure James and Lily turned the corner before sliding into the leather seat, maintaining the fiction, a little longer, home Ms. Martinez. The name felt like a splash of cold water yanking her back to reality from the warm dream of being Tori. Yes, please, James. The contrast hit her as the car pulled away from Meridian, navigating Manhattan streets toward the Upper East Side. Two worlds impossibly far apart, yet for a few hours tonight they'd occupied the same space, shared the same table, created something that felt real despite being built on omission, if not outright deception. The mansion loomed against the night sky when they arrived, all glass and steel and architectural significance, the kind of place that appeared in design magazines and inspired envy in people who'd never understand how profoundly lonely it felt to own so much space you could wander for hours without encountering another living soul. The doorman greeted her with practiced deference as she entered the marble foyer, every surface gleaming in the soft lighting decorated by designers whose names alone cost six figures. Immaculate. Impressive. Cold as a mausoleum. She'd bought this place to prove something, though she could no longer remember exactly what. That she'd made it. That the girl from San Antonio whose parents had cleaned houses could own a piece of Manhattan real estate worth more than entire neighborhoods. Whatever point she'd been making felt hollow. Now the mansion just another beautiful cage. Her phone buzzed with notifications as she kicked off her heels, the cold marble shocking against her feet. 37 messages. Board members with questions that could have waited until Monday. Executives seeking approval for decisions they were paid to make themselves. Market alerts from Asian trading hours. The machinery of Martinez Energy never stopped even when its founder tried to steal a few hours of normal human interaction. Elena padded to her home office, the space dominated by 3 monitors showing real-time market feeds and encrypted communications channels. She hadn't planned to work tonight, but old habits died hard. The discipline that built empires didn't respect boundaries like work-life balance, and part of her welcomed the familiar refuge of spreadsheets and strategy documents, problems she knew how to solve. But first, she did something she'd never done before. Sitting at her desk with its commanding view of Manhattan's glittering skyline, she pulled up Google and typed, James Cooper, Lincoln High School, Brooklyn. The search returned exactly what she expected, a faculty page showing a professional headshot that didn't quite capture the warmth she'd seen at dinner, listing his credentials and course offerings, noting his role as wrestling coach and literary magazine advisor. No social media presence to speak of, another rarity in the digital age where everyone performed their lives for invisible audiences. Relief washed through her so intense it was almost dizzying. If James had no digital footprint, he was unlikely to stumble across the hundreds of articles, interviews, and business profiles that would immediately reveal exactly who Tori really was. The Elena Martinez who appeared in business publications and at industry events was carefully separated from her private life by teams of lawyers and public relations professionals who managed her image with the same precision she applied to managing her company. Her secure line rang the tone reserved for Sarah and genuine emergencies. Everything okay with the Singapore deal? Sarah's voice carried professional crispness despite the late hour, the kind of efficiency that had made her invaluable over their 6 years working together. Yes. All finalized, but there's something else. Ethan Blake just announced a breakthrough in solid-state battery technology. It's all over the tech news. Elena felt her stomach tighten, muscles clenching with the familiar tension that accompanied any mention of Ethan Blake, former fiancé who'd left her when Martinez Energy was still struggling in a cramped office with more ambition than funding. Claiming he couldn't hitch his future to her unrealistic ambitions, that she was chasing impossible dreams while he needed stability, security, a partner who understood practical limitations. Now he headed Blake Technologies, a rival firm where every business move he made seemed designed to undercut her success. A bitter man trying to prove he hadn't made the worst decision of his life by abandoning the woman who'd gone on to build an empire. How significant is the breakthrough? Sarah's pause spoke volumes, the hesitation of someone delivering news she knew would ruin her boss's evening. Significant enough. Early reports suggest 30% more efficiency than our current models. Stock analysts are already speculating about market shifts. Elena pulled up the business news sites. Ethan's smug face staring back from her screen alongside graphs predicting Martinez Energy's potential vulnerability. The articles breathlessly reported his solid-state battery as a potential game-changer, conveniently ignoring the manufacturing challenges that would plague commercialization for years, the gap between laboratory prototypes and industrial production that had killed more promising technologies than Ethan had probably even heard of. Have the team prepare comprehensive analysis for Monday's board meeting. We'll need to accelerate the Jensen project timeline. And Sarah, I want a full competitive assessment by Sunday afternoon. Revenue projections, manufacturing scalability, everything. Her mind shifted into strategic mode, calculating moves and counter-moves in the corporate chess game. She'd mastered the familiar territory where she knew exactly who she was and what she needed to do. Attack Ethan's weak points in manufacturing scalability. Double down on Martinez Energy's proven technology and established supply chains. Calm institutional investors with clear vision and unshakable confidence backed by actual numbers rather than vaporware promises. Only after hanging up did Elena realize how completely she'd switched from Tori back to Elena Martinez, CEO. The warm glow from dinner faded as reality reasserted itself. The weight of $11 billion in market capitalization settling back onto her shoulders like a familiar burden. What was she thinking, arranging to meet James and Lily tomorrow? Their worlds couldn't be more different. A high school teacher who worried about leaving adequate tips and a billionaire who could buy the restaurant without checking her bank balance. She should cancel. Make up an excuse. End this before it began, before someone got hurt. Probably, or though she'd gotten used to that particular pain years ago. The dull ache of isolation that came with success at her level. Yet when she picked up her phone to craft the cancellation text, her fingers refused to move, hovering over the keyboard without typing. The memory of Lily's hopeful face, James's genuine smile, the feeling of being seen as a person rather than a portfolio stopped her cold. One day at the park wouldn't hurt anyone. She could be Tori for a few more hours before returning fully to Elena's world of corporate warfare and billion-dollar decisions. Just one day. Then she'd figure out what to do about the growing lie about the foundation of deception she was building under what felt like the most genuine connection she'd experienced in years. The next morning arrived earlier than usual. Elena's sleep disrupted by dreams she couldn't quite remember, but left her unsettled, reaching for something just beyond grasp. She stood before her closet at 7 a.m., staring at power suits and designer dresses with unfamiliar indecision. The simple question of what to wear to a playground somehow more challenging than deciding how to deploy hundreds of millions in capital investments. She tried on and discarded 5 different outfits before finally settling on dark jeans, expensive enough to feel like armor, but casual enough to blend in, and a simple silk blouse in dove gray. Flats instead of heels, the absence of height making her feel strangely vulnerable. Her signature Patek Philippe came off, replaced with a delicate silver bracelet she'd bought years ago in a moment of whimsy, and never worn, too simple for galas and too frivolous for board meetings. The woman looking back from the mirror seemed softer, somehow younger than the steel-eyed CEO whose photo graced the cover of Business Weekly last month, above the headline, "The Woman Who Made Batteries Sexy." She looked like someone who might actually belong at a playground on a Saturday morning. Someone whose biggest concern was which swing set to claim rather than whether her company's stock price would survive a competitor's announcement. Elena instructed her driver to drop her 2 blocks from the playground entrance, maintaining the fiction of normalcy a little longer. The walk would give her time to settle her thoughts, to step fully into Tori's skin, before facing James and Lily to leave Elena Martinez in the town car with her phone and her responsibilities and her billions. She spotted them immediately when the playground came into view, impossible to miss, even in the Saturday morning crowd of families enjoying the spring weather. James pushed Lily on the swings, the girls' delighted laughter carrying across the park like music, pure joy that seemed to fill the entire space. "Higher, Daddy, higher!" His patient encouragement, his ready hands positioned to catch if she fell, the simple pleasure they took in each other's presence. It all spoke to a richness Elena's fortune had never bought. Connections money couldn't purchase. Lily saw her first, somehow sensing Elena's presence across 50 yards of playground equipment and scattered families. She wriggled out of the swing mid-arc with the fearlessness of youth and raced across the playground, arms outstretched, face alight with uncomplicated welcome. "You came. I knew you would." The impact of the small body nearly knocked Elena backward, Lily's arms wrapping around her legs with complete trust. "Daddy said you might be too busy with your important job, but I told him you promised, and you don't break promises. People who break promises are mean." Elena knelt to the child's level, enveloping her in a genuine embrace that felt simultaneously foreign and necessary warmth, spreading through regions of her heart she'd thought permanently frozen. "I missed you so much, sweetheart. And look at you in your special Saturday outfit." Lily beamed, executing a twirl to show off her outfit. "It has sparkles." "Do you see the sparkles?" "I do see them. They're beautiful, just like you." James approached more slowly, hands shoved in his pockets in a gesture Elena was learning to recognize as his tell for uncertainty. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come. People say they'll show up and then, well, plans change." The slight surprise in his voice suggested experience with broken promises, with people who found better options and disappeared without explanation. The particular pain of hope, disappointed enough times that you learn to expect it. Elena felt an unexpected need to prove herself trustworthy to this man who expected so little, who'd been let down enough to guard his expectations carefully. "I said I would." 3 words, simple and direct, but they seemed to mean something to James. His expression softened, the wariness receding like fog burning off under morning sun. "Well then, Lily's been talking about nothing else since we woke up. She has big plans for teaching you the monkey bars." The afternoon unfolded in a series of simple pleasures Elena had almost forgotten existed, moments untainted by strategy or agenda. Pushing Lily on the swings, the girl's squeals intensifying with each arc, her absolute faith that the hands behind her wouldn't let her fall. Watching her navigate the climbing structure with serious concentration, small face determined as she figured out which handholds would support her weight, which route would get her to the top. Sitting on a bench talking with James while Lily made friends with other children, their easy laughter a soundtrack to adult conversation that flowed without the careful positioning Elena usually employed. "So, what happened to your date last night?" James asked eventually, his tone casual but his eyes attentive in a way that suggested genuine interest rather than polite inquiry. Elena shrugged, the truth easier than fabrication for once. "Blind date my assistant arranged. I guess he took one look through the window and decided to bail. Probably saw a better option walk by and made his choice." James shook his head, something close to outrage in his expression, the kind of instinctive defense she hadn't inspired in someone since she couldn't actually remember when. "His loss. Seriously, anyone who'd stand you up is either an idiot or has terrible taste. Possibly both." The sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm, in a way board meetings and investor praise never achieved. A flush of pleasure that had nothing to do with strategic victories or market dominance. She deflected with a question of her own, turning the focus away from her own disappointments. "What about you? Do you date much? Between teaching coaching and Lily, not really. He watched his daughter playing tag with a group of kids, pride evident in every line of his face. It's been just the two of us for so long, I'm not sure I remember how dating even works anymore. The rules probably changed while I wasn't paying attention. You're doing fine so far. The bold statement emerged before Elena could censor her self-honesty, overriding the careful filters she usually maintained. James turned to look at her, a question forming in his eyes that made her heartbeat accelerate, anticipation and anxiety mixing in her chest. But before he could speak, before the moment could tip into something that might require explanations, she wasn't ready to give. Lily came running over, breathless and flushed from exertion. I'm hungry. Can we get hot dogs? The man over there has hot dogs and they smell so good. The moment dissolved, yet the current of possibility remained electric and terrifying and more real than anything Elena had felt in years. They bought hot dogs from a vendor, Elena pulling cash from her wallet with practiced ease. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a street hot dog, probably college, before Martinez's energy consumed her life and transformed every meal into either fuel or obligation. It tasted better than any five-star restaurant meal she'd enjoyed recently, the simple pleasure of food eaten outdoors on a spring day with people who wanted nothing from her except her company. As the afternoon wore on, Lily's boundless energy began to wane. She curled up against James's side on the bench, eyelids growing heavy despite her efforts to stay awake, fighting sleep, the way children did when they didn't want to miss anything. I think someone's ready for a nap, James said softly, his arm protective around his daughter. We should probably head home. Disappointment settled in Elena's chest, physical weight that surprised her with its intensity. James hesitated, seeming to weigh something carefully, his expression shifting through emotions Elena couldn't quite read. Maybe we could do this again. Without the playground next time. Just you and me. If you'd like that. I mean, if you're interested. The vulnerability in the invitation, the risk he was taking, touched something deep in Elena. I'd like that very much. They exchanged phone numbers, James programming hers into his phone under a single name, Tori. No last name, no company affiliation, no billions, just Tori. It felt refreshing, like slipping out of shoes that had pinched for too long, liberation from the weight of her public identity. As Elena watched them leave, James carrying a sleepy Lily, the child's head on his shoulder, small arms wrapped around his neck in complete trust, she felt torn between two worlds with increasing force. The world she'd built with ruthless determination, board meetings, and billion-dollar decisions, and this new possibility of simple joy found on a park bench with a man who knew nothing of her empire. Her phone buzzed, reality intruding with the inevitability of gravity. Text from Sarah, emergency board call in 30 minutes. Ethan Blake announcement causing investor panic. Elena sighed, the warm afternoon dissolving like morning mist. She hailed a cab, the driver's eyes widening in recognition when she slid into the back seat. Miss Martinez, an honor to have you in my cab. Should I take you to Martinez Tower? The eager deference was a sharp contrast to James's straightforward treatment to Lily's uncomplicated welcome. Yes, please. She slipped the CEO mask back on her mind, already shifting to the coming confrontation with her board, to the strategic responses Ethan's announcement would require, to the careful balance of projecting confidence while addressing legitimate concerns. Martinez Tower dominated the skyline as they approached, glass and steel, reaching toward clouds, a gleaming testament to Elena's vision and relentless drive. As she entered the executive elevator, employees nodded respectfully, their eyes lowering when she looked their way. The weight of being Elena Martinez settled back on her shoulders, familiar and heavy. The boardroom fell silent when she entered, 8 men and 3 women in expensive suits, looking to her for reassurance for the leadership that had turned their investments into fortunes. Elena took her place at the head of the table, her casual park clothes replaced by an emergency suit kept in her office for exactly these situations, Armani perfectly tailored armor against doubt. Before we begin, I've reviewed Blake's announcement. Her voice carried cool control, each word measured and deliberate. It's significant but not catastrophic. Their solid-state technology shows promise, but faces substantial manufacturing hurdles we've anticipated for years. Our counter-strategy is already in motion. She nodded to her CTO, who began presenting the accelerated timeline for Martinez Energy's competing technology. The advantages of their established manufacturing processes, the relationships with suppliers that Ethan's company would take years to develop. As the meeting progressed, Elena was fully present, steering discussion with the strategic brilliance that had built her empire. Every question anticipated, every concern addressed with data and projections that slowly transformed anxiety into confidence. Yet, somewhere in the back of her mind, she kept seeing James's genuine smile, feeling Lily's small hand in hers, remembering what it felt like to be Tori for a few hours, unburdened by the weight of billions and the expectations of thousands of employees and investors who depended on her decisions. Two worlds that seemed impossible to reconcile, yet she couldn't bring herself to choose between them. Not yet. After the meeting, Sarah followed her into the office, placing a stack of documents requiring signatures on Elena's desk with practiced efficiency. The board's reassured for now. You always know exactly what to say to them. It's like watching a masterclass in crisis management. Elena nodded absently, her mind elsewhere, pen moving across signature pages without conscious thought. Sarah, tell me something. When was the last time I took a day off? A real day, not working from a different location or taking calls between tourist attractions. Sarah blinked, surprised by the question that seemed to come from nowhere. Honestly, I can't remember. Maybe 3 years ago when you had the flu, and even then you took calls from your bedroom. So why clear my schedule this Saturday? The whole day, personal time. Sarah's shock was evident, the request unprecedented in their entire working relationship. The whole day, like no calls at all. What about the whole day? Elena's tone left no room for negotiation. Move whatever needs moving. Delegate what can be delegated. I'll be unreachable. Understood. Sarah made notes on her tablet, professional mask firmly in place, but Elena caught the flicker of curiosity, the questions her chief of staff was too disciplined to ask. Consider it done. As Sarah left, Elena found herself staring out at the city sprawling below her office, wondering which neighborhood James and Lily called home, wondering if she could really keep these worlds separate, or if collision was inevitable, and whether she even wanted to prevent it anymore. Over the following weeks, Elena lived a double life with increasing complexity, compartmentalizing her existence in ways that would have impressed even the most skilled spy. By day, she remained the formidable CEO, driving Martinez Energy forward, countering Ethan's announcement with an accelerated innovation timeline that kept shareholders confident and competitors wary, maintaining the iron control that had built her reputation. But evenings and weekends increasingly belonged to Tori, to the woman who met James for coffee and helped Lily with homework and learned that there were kinds of wealth that had nothing to do with bank balances. She met James for coffee after his teaching day ended, their conversations ranging from Hemingway's sparse prose to the challenges of reaching students who'd learned to expect failure from every adult in their lives. Dinner at modest Brooklyn restaurants where they split the bill, Elena carefully using cash to avoid the credit card key that would immediately reveal her identity with a single transaction. Movie nights at James' small apartment after Lily went to bed, the worn couch and modest furnishings more comfortable than her mansion's designer perfection, the space filled with warmth that had nothing to do with expensive heating systems. They settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural, as if her life had always contained space for this other version of herself. Elena learned that James had been the first in his family to attend college, working construction every summer to pay tuition while his father questioned the value of book learning over trade skills that actually put food on the table. That he spoke of literature with a passion that made dead authors come alive, quoting Baldwin on the price of the ticket, and Morrison on the necessity of memory, with the same ease other men quoted sports statistics or market trends. His wrestling team had become a second family teenage boys who looked to him for guidance that extended far beyond the mat young men learning that strength included vulnerability, that discipline was a gift you gave yourself. She saw it one evening when she picked him up after practice, the way those boys watched him seeking approval, craving the attention of a man who saw potential in them, when others saw only statistics about dropout rates and incarceration probabilities. Elena found herself sharing parts of herself she'd kept hidden for years, truths buried under layers of corporate armor. Her childhood in San Antonio, daughter of Mexican immigrants who'd built a modest life through back-breaking work that left her mother's hands permanently scarred and her father's back chronically aching. Her parents' initial disappointment when she abandoned medical school for the uncertain world of tech startups, the arguments about wasting her education, throwing away security for dreams that seemed designed to fail, the early vision for energy storage solutions that everyone except her had dismissed as impossible, the years of rejection from investors who couldn't see past her age and gender to the brilliance of the technology. She spoke of those early years carefully editing out the billions that Vision had eventually generated, the empire built from that initial breakthrough that had proven every doubter catastrophically wrong. Each omission felt like a small betrayal, another brick in a wall she was building between them, even as she tried to draw closer. But the alternative revealing herself as Elena Martinez made her stomach clench with fear that felt almost primal. Would James look at her differently? Would the genuine connection they were building survive the weight of her wealth and fame? Or would he see her as everyone else did? A walking opportunity. A means to an end. A bank account with a pulse. Week 6 brought their first kiss, the moment inevitable, yet still surprising when it arrived. Movie night at James's apartment. Lily asleep in the next room after they'd read her 3 stories about brave princesses and clever foxes who solved problems with intelligence rather than magic. They sat on his worn couch, wine in hand, the comfortable silence of people learning to be at ease together, to not fill every moment with words. "You're amazing with her." James's voice was quiet, intimate in the lamp-lit room. "She adores you. The way you listen to her, really listen. Most adults don't do that with kids, they just wait for them to stop talking so they can get back to adult conversations. The feeling is mutual." Elena meant it. Lily's intelligence, her curiosity, her openness had captivated her from that first meeting at Meridian. "She's a special kid. You've raised an incredible human being. It's more than that, though. You treat her like a person, not just a child. Like her thoughts and feelings matter as much as anyone's." He set his wine glass down, an expression serious in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Do you want children someday? Your own, I mean." The question caught Elena off-guard, territory she'd avoided thinking about for years. In her world of board meetings and investment decisions, family planning had always seemed like a distant concept, something for someday when her company was established, when she'd proven everything she needed to prove. Now at 32, with an empire built and no one to share it with, the question hit differently. "I've never really thought about it. My work has always been all-consuming. There never seemed to be room for anything else, and I told myself that was enough, that building something meaningful was its own kind of legacy. The mysterious job you never talk about." James teased gently, but a question lurked beneath the lightness, curiosity he'd been too polite to push. "What exactly do you do that's so all-consuming? You've mentioned investment management, but that covers a lot of ground." Elena shifted uncomfortably, the conversation veering too close to truth she wasn't ready to reveal. "It's not that interesting, really. Just work. Numbers and projections and meetings that all blur together after a while." "I doubt that. Everything about you is interesting, Tori." He moved closer, his hand finding hers, calloused fingers intertwining with her softer ones, in a way that felt both new and inevitable. "I know we haven't known each other long, but I feel like I've been waiting to meet you. Like my life was in black and white, and you walked in with all the colors I didn't know I was missing." The sincerity in his voice made her breath catch, vulnerability and hope mixing in her chest with guilt about the deception she was maintaining. When he leaned in to kiss her, she met him halfway, his lips soft against hers, his touch gentle yet confident in a way that suggested he knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to reach for it. It felt right in a way nothing had in years, authentic connection, without calculation or agenda. Just two people choosing each other in a moment of honest desire. When they broke apart, James's eyes searched hers, finding something that made him smile. "I should probably tell you something. I looked you up online after our second date. I was curious about you." Elena's heart sank, tension flooding her body like ice water through her veins, every muscle suddenly taut with anticipation of exposure. "And what did you find?" "Nothing." He looked genuinely puzzled, almost amused by the mystery. "No social media, no LinkedIn, nothing. It's strange in this day and age. Most people have some kind of digital footprint, but you're like a ghost. I couldn't find anything about Tori and investment management or renewable energy. It's like you don't exist online." Relief washed through her so intensely, it was almost dizzying, muscles relaxing so quickly, she felt momentarily weak. Her team was thorough in managing her digital footprint, keeping personal information scrubbed from public view, creating firewalls between Elena Martinez, the CEO, and any casual searches that might connect her to Tori. The Elena Martinez who appeared in business publications and at industry events was carefully separated from her private life by professionals who understood that privacy was a luxury worth paying for. "I'm not big on social media. The platforms feel like performance spaces where everyone's constantly auditioning for approval from strangers. I'd rather live my life than document it for people I've never met." James laughed, the sound warm and genuine, free from judgment. "Clearly, it's refreshing, actually. Most people are living their entire lives online these days, curating perfect versions of themselves that have nothing to do with reality. It's nice to meet someone who's just real." He kissed her again, and Elena let herself sink into the moment, pushing away the voice that reminded her she was building this relationship on a foundation of omission, if not outright deception. This happiness, this connection, it felt too precious to risk, too rare to gamble on honesty that might destroy everything she was building with this man and his daughter. As weeks turned into months, Elena found herself increasingly divided between her worlds, the compartmentalization requiring more energy to maintain. The more time she spent with James and Lily, the more she questioned the life she'd built as Elena Martinez. The relentless drive, the isolation at the top, the relationships based on what she could provide rather than who she was. All of it seemed hollow compared to evenings spent helping Lily with homework or discussing Baldwin with James, to moments of genuine connection that cost nothing, but meant everything. Yet her company needed her more than ever. Ethan's announcement had shifted market perceptions, analysts questioning whether Martinez Energy could maintain its technological edge, investors growing nervous about competition from a former industry insider who understood their strategies. Maintaining confidence required Elena's full attention, her complete commitment to projecting strength and vision, even when exhaustion threatened to undermine both. She canceled plans with James twice due to work emergencies, offering vague explanations that left him confused but too respectful to press for details she clearly didn't want to provide. The first time she'd promised to attend one of his wrestling matches, to see him in his element coaching the boys he spoke about with such obvious pride. An emergency board call about a supply chain disruption in Asia forced her to bail 30 minutes before the match started, her text message. Inadequate apology for a broken promise. The second time hurt worse. She'd committed to helping Lily practice her presentation for the school science fair, had spent an evening, the week before, helping her daughter refine her volcano demonstration into something truly spectacular. But a critical investor meeting ran 4 hours over schedule, and by the time Elena could break away, it was past Lily's bedtime, the practice session impossible to reschedule before the actual fair. James's response had been understanding, both times his texts gracious and free from recrimination. But Elena could feel the distance growing, could sense his doubts accumulating even if he never voiced them directly. What kind of investment analyst had such unpredictable emergency demands? What work required sudden cancellations without explanation or advance warning? The situation came to a head during a weekend at the American Museum of Natural History, 3 months into their relationship. They'd spent the morning exploring dinosaur exhibits, Lily running ahead in excitement, her questions about extinction and evolution. Endless and wonderful. Each answer spawning 3 new inquiries that demonstrated a mind eager to understand how the world worked. Elena and James followed hand in hand, and for those hours she let herself believe this could work, that somehow she could bridge her 2 worlds without casualties, that love and honesty weren't mutually exclusive, even when billions of dollars complicated every equation. They'd bought Lily a stuffed stegosaurus in the gift shop, her face lighting with joy over a $12 toy, in a way that made Elena's heart ache with the recognition that happiness really wasn't proportional to cost. Then she saw Charles Winthrop approaching with his family, and panic surged through her system like voltage through circuits, every nerve suddenly alive with danger. Charles was one of her major investors, a man who knew her well enough to recognize her despite casual clothes and the absence of the makeup she typically wore to business functions. There would be no avoiding acknowledgement, no pretending to be anyone other than exactly who she was. Her mind raced through scenarios, calculating probabilities and outcomes with the speed that had made her fortune. If Charles called out to her as Victoria or Elena, if he mentioned Martinez Energy or the board meeting next week, if he said anything that connected her to her public identity, the entire careful structure of her relationship with James would collapse in seconds. "James, would you mind getting Lily some water?" She looks a bit flushed. The request came out sharper than intended urgency, making her tone harsh. James looked at her with surprise, clearly noting the sudden shift in her demeanor. The tension that had transformed her body language from relaxed to rigid. "Sure. Everything okay?" "Fine. Just want to make sure she stays hydrated. It's warm in here." James nodded and headed toward the water fountain, with Lily giving Elena precious seconds to intercept Charles before he could spot them. The moment they were out of earshot, Elena stepped directly into Charles's path, her CEO voice fully present, every bit of warmth from the morning evaporating. "Charles. What a surprise. Here with the grandkids." His eyebrows rose in recognition, surprise and pleasure mixing on his features. Victoria. "Yes, weekend grandpa duty. What brings you here?" "I didn't think museums were your scene unless they were naming a wing after you." He chuckled at his own joke, oblivious to Elena's carefully positioned body blocking his view of James and Lily at the water fountain 50 feet away, to the desperation underlying her forced smile. "Research, actually. Looking at some educational initiatives the company might support. We're considering partnerships with institutions that promote STEM education for underserved communities." "Always working, aren't you?" "That's why Martinez Energy stays on top. You never stop thinking strategically. We should set up lunch next week. I have some thoughts on the Blake situation, some intel about his manufacturing capabilities that might interest you. Have your office call Sarah." Elena was already edging away, positioning herself to guide Charles toward a different exhibit before James returned. "Enjoy your weekend, Charles. Give my best to Margaret." She managed to steer him and his family toward the Hall of Ocean Life before rejoining James and Lily, her heart still pounding from how close that had been, how narrowly she'd avoided exposure. Too close. Way too close. The incident highlighted the precariousness of her double life in ways she could no longer ignore. "Who was that?" James asked as they continued through the museum. His tone casual, but his eyes searching her face with the attention of someone who'd learned to read between lines. "You looked like you knew him pretty well. Friend of yours." Elena's mind raced for a plausible explanation, something that wouldn't be a complete lie, but wouldn't reveal the truth either. "Just someone I know through work." Investment circles are surprisingly small in New York. You run into the same people at different events, and eventually you're on first-name basis, even if you're not really friends. The half-truth tasted bitter on her tongue, another brick in the wall of deception she was building between them. James accepted her explanation without question, his trust another weight on her conscience, another thing she was betraying with every omission and carefully crafted evasion. As they finished their museum tour and emerged into afternoon sunshine, Elena found herself increasingly distracted, the enjoyment of the day tainted by the close call and the growing awareness that she couldn't maintain this indefinitely. How long could she keep these worlds separate, and what would happen when, not if, but when they inevitably collided with the force of all her carefully constructed lies? The answer came sooner than she expected. 3 days later, on a Wednesday morning that started innocuously enough, Elena was having breakfast with James and Lily at his apartment, a rare weekday morning she'd cleared from her schedule specifically for Lily's science fair that afternoon. The little girl chattered excitedly about her volcano project, demonstrating the eruption with elaborate hand gestures that knocked over the orange juice, her enthusiasm infectious, even as it created chaos. Easy, scientist. James laughed, mopping up the spill with practiced efficiency born of years managing a 6-year-old's exuberance. We need to save some of that energy for the actual presentation. Show them the baking soda reaction, not just tell them about it. Elena's secure phone buzzed with the emergency code reserved for genuine crises, the particular pattern of vibration that meant something had gone catastrophically wrong and required her immediate attention. Her stomach dropped even before she looked at the screen, that sixth sense developed over years of high-stakes business telling her, this was bad. I'm sorry I have to take this. She stepped into the hallway. James's puzzled expression following her confusion evident in the way his brow furrowed as he tried to understand what kind of investment analyst received emergency calls before 8 in the morning. Her CFO's voice carried stress that immediately put her on high alert, the kind of barely controlled panic that suggested markets were burning and someone needed to put out fires. Elena, the Singapore markets are in free fall. Our Asia division needs direction immediately. There's been a major disruption in our primary supply chain. Factory fire in Taiwan took out 30% of our component production capacity. The board is assembling for an emergency call in 30 minutes, and investors are already calling for your personal reassurance. I'll be there. Have the jet ready. We may need to fly to Singapore tonight if this can't be managed remotely. When she returned to the table, James and Lily were both looking at her with concern. The morning's joy evaporated under the weight of whatever they'd seen in her expression. Everything okay? Work emergency. I'm so sorry, but I have to go. Right now. She was already gathering her purse, shifting into crisis management mode, even as guilt churned in her stomach about the promise she was breaking, the disappointment she was about to cause. She'd promised Lily she'd be there for the science fair, had cleared her entire afternoon for this one simple commitment that meant so much to a 6-year-old who'd already lost one important woman in her life. On a Wednesday morning, James's confusion was evident, his tone carrying the first hints of frustration after months of accepting her vague explanations without pushing. Your investment firm needs you that urgently, international business, different time zones. Elena heard how weak it sounded even as she said it, how inadequate the explanation was for the kind of emergency that required immediate departure. I'm so sorry to miss the science fair, Lily. She kissed the top of the child's head, the disappointment in those small eyes breaking something inside her, cracking the armor she'd built around her heart through years of prioritizing business over every other aspect of life. Will you tell me all about it when I get back? Every detail about how your volcano worked and what the judges said. When will that be? James asked, his confusion deepening to concern, the question carrying weight beyond simple curiosity about her return timeline. Elena couldn't meet his eyes, couldn't bear to see the doubt and hurt she knew would be written there. I'm not sure. A few days, maybe a week. I'll call when I can. I promise. A weak Tory. What exactly do you do? This doesn't sound like typical investment work. Most analysts don't jet off to Asia at a moment's notice. It's complicated. I'll explain everything when I get back, I promise. She kissed him quickly, tasting the lie bitter on her lips, and fled before he could ask more questions. She couldn't answer without revealing everything, before the structure of her carefully maintained deception collapsed under the weight of his legitimate confusion. Behind her, she left a bewildered man and a disappointed child. Two people who deserved better than her half-truths and strategic evasions, who'd opened their hearts to someone who was lying about fundamental aspects of her identity. The helicopter to the airport, the private jet to Singapore, the endless meetings and emergency strategy sessions. All of it blurred together over the next 12 days. Elena was in full CEO mode, navigating the crisis with the same ruthless efficiency that had built her empire, marshaling resources across 3 continents, calming panicked investors, restructuring supply chains on the fly with the kind of decisive action that had made her reputation. But in quiet moments between calls and presentations in hotel rooms at 3 in the morning, when jet lag made sleep impossible, she thought about James and Lily, about the life she was building with them, even as she proved exactly why it could never work. Her world would always intrude, would always take precedence, would always demand sacrifices that people like James couldn't understand, and children like Lily shouldn't have to accept. She called when she could brief conversations that left James more confused than reassured, the distance between them growing with each unsatisfying exchange. "You're in Asia. For an investment job." His disbelief was clear even across the crackling international connection, the skepticism she couldn't blame him for feeling. What kind of investment analyst commanded the resources for emergency international travel, for the kind of authority that came through in her voice when she barked orders in the background of their calls? It's complicated. The same inadequate response, the same evasion that was becoming her default answer to every probing question. Each call made the distance between them feel less geographical and more fundamental, a gulf opening between the woman James thought he knew and the person she actually was. By the time Elena returned to New York nearly 2 weeks later, she knew something had shifted irrevocably. She'd proven to herself and to James that her world would always intrude, that the demands of Martinez energy would always take precedence over promises made to 6-year-olds and men who deserved better than mysterious disappearances and vague explanations about international business. She texted James from the airport, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard as she tried to find words that might bridge the gap she'd created. "I'm back. Can I come over? We need to talk." His reply was simple, lacking the warmth she'd grown accustomed to, the affection that had colored every previous exchange. "We're home." Those 2 words carried volumes of hurt and confusion and patience, worn thin by 2 weeks of inadequate explanations. As the car navigated Brooklyn streets toward his apartment, Elena knew the reckoning she'd been avoiding was finally here. The truth would emerge one way or another, and everything she'd built with James and Lily would either survive the revelation or shatter under its weight. She suspected she already knew which outcome was more likely, could feel the foundation crumbling even before she knocked on his door. Lily answered, her face lighting up with uncomplicated joy that made Elena's chest ache. "Tori, you're back. Did you bring me something from your trip?" The question landed like a punch, innocent and devastating. Elena hadn't even thought to buy souvenirs, her mind consumed with market stabilization and emergency board meetings and the 100 fires that required her attention as CEO of a company worth more than some nation's GDP. That oversight, that failure to think of Lily even once while she was gone, highlighted the impossibility of what she was trying to do: be Elena Martinez and Tori simultaneously serve 2 masters who demanded everything and accepted nothing less. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. It was all work, no shopping. I should have thought of that. I'm sorry." The disappointment that flickered across that small face twisted something sharp in Elena's chest. guilt mixing with the growing awareness that she was hurting people who didn't deserve it, who'd done nothing except trust her and welcome her into their lives. James appeared behind his daughter, his expression guarded in a way it had never been before. The warmth that usually lit his eyes when he saw her, absent, replaced by something wary and hurt that made her want to turn around and flee. "Welcome back." The words carried frost despite the mild delivery civility covering disappointment and confusion. Lily retreated to her room at James's gentle suggestion, casting backward glances that made Elena want to explain, to justify, to somehow make this child understand why she'd broken her promise about the science fair. Why work had to come first, even when it meant disappointing people she cared about. "Can we talk?" James nodded toward the living room. His body language closed off in ways she'd never seen, arms crossed protectively as if defending against attack. They sat on the couch where they'd shared their first kiss just weeks ago, but the distance between them now felt measured in miles rather than inches, an unbridgeable gap created by all her evasions and half-truths. "So, are you going to tell me what's really going on?" Because investment analysts don't jet off to Asia at a moment's notice for weeks at a time. They don't have emergency codes on their phones or private jets or the kind of authority I heard in your voice when you were giving orders during our calls. His directness left no room for evasion, no space for the careful deflections she'd been using for months. Elena took a breath, feeling the foundation of everything they'd built together trembling beneath her feet, knowing that the next words out of her mouth would either save this or destroy it completely. "You're right. I haven't been completely honest with you." She watched his expression darken, jaw tightening in a way that suggested he was bracing for betrayal, preparing himself for confirmation of suspicions that had been growing with each inadequate explanation. "Are you married? Is that it? You have a whole other life somewhere, and I'm just the Brooklyn diversion." "What? No, nothing like that. I'm not married, I don't have secret children or a hidden family. It's not that kind of lie." "Then what?" "Because I've been racking my brain trying to figure out why someone would be so secretive about their job. Why you'd disappear to another continent with barely an explanation. Why you keep everything so vague whenever I ask about your work." The hurt in his voice was worse than anger. Would have been raw confusion and betrayal cutting deeper than any boardroom confrontation ever could. Anger she could have defended against, matched with her own fire and force of personality. But this wounded bewilderment, this sense of having been deceived by someone he'd trusted, disarmed her completely. "I'm not just an investment analyst." She paused, the words catching in her throat like broken glass, sharp and dangerous. This was the moment. No going back once she spoke, no way to unsay what she was about to reveal. "I'm the founder and CEO of Martinez Energy Solutions." James stared at her, incomprehension clear on his features as the name bounced off him without recognition. The name meant nothing to him yet. This man who lived outside the bubble of tech news and business journals, who spent his days teaching teenagers about Hemingway and helping them navigate the complexities of growing up, rather than tracking market movements and industry developments. Elena felt an absurd urge to laugh at the irony she was famous in certain circles. Her name synonymous with innovation and ruthless business acumen. And the man she'd fallen for had no idea who she was. "It's a tech company, renewable energy storage solutions, battery technology. We're significant in the industry." Recognition dawned slowly, understanding spreading across his face like sunrise, revealing a landscape that had been hidden in darkness. Martinez Energy. The Martinez Energy that's always in the business news. The billion-dollar company that's supposedly revolutionizing renewable storage. 11.2 billion as of last quarter, actually. The number hung between them obscene in its magnitude, especially here in this modest Brooklyn apartment where James worried about rent increases and saved for his daughter's college fund, one paycheck at a time, where $12 stuffed dinosaurs represented meaningful purchases rather than rounding errors on quarterly statements. "You're a billionaire." His voice had gone hollow, all emotion draining from it, in a way that frightened her more than rage would have, a flatness that suggested something fundamental breaking inside him. He sank back against the couch cushions, visibly processing information that rewrote everything he thought he knew about the woman he'd been seeing for 3 months, recalibrating every interaction through this new lens that changed all the colors. "Yes." The silence stretched, painful and heavy. Elena watched thoughts chase across James's face, saw him working backward through their time together, recontextualizing every interaction, every moment where she'd let him pay for coffee or leave tips at restaurants, every time she'd accepted his modest gestures while sitting on billions that made his entire life's earnings a rounding error. "And you let me pay for coffee. Let me leave those tips at restaurants like I was contributing something meaningful. Let me worry about whether I could afford to take you to dinner at places that probably cost less than you spend on a single business lunch." His voice carried something worse than anger, humiliation, the corrosive shame of realizing he'd been performing generosity in front of someone for whom his grandest gestures were laughably insignificant. "I wanted you to see me, not my money." Elena heard how weak it sounded, even as she said it, how insufficient the explanation was for the depth of her deception. "From the moment we met, you treated me like a person, not a bank account or a business connection. Do you know how rare that is in my world? How precious it felt to be seen for myself rather than what I could provide? But you lied to me." The accusation was quiet but devastating, carrying weight that had nothing to do with volume. I omitted. I never directly lied about even to her own ears. The distinction sounded pathetic sophistry that might work in boardrooms but failed completely in living rooms where actual human relationships were being torn apart. James's expression hardened the English teacher in him, unwilling to accept semantic games or rhetorical evasions. Lies of omission are still lies, Tori. Or should I call you Elena Victoria? Which name is even real? His pain manifested as sarcasm, cutting edge to words that struck harder than simple anger. "I'm an English teacher. I understand how words work, how truth works. You built this entire relationship on a foundation of deception. Let me believe I knew you while hiding the most fundamental aspects of your identity." She had no defense because he was right, because every dinner and conversation and moment of connection had been tainted by the truth she'd withheld, every kiss flavored with the lie she was maintaining through carefully chosen words and strategic silences. "Did you think I'd treat you differently if I knew? Try to take advantage of you? Use you for your money? It wasn't about that. People always want something from me, James. Always." Elena's voice cracked despite her efforts to maintain composure. Years of loneliness and transactional relationships threatening to spill out in this moment of reckoning. Business deals, investments, donations, connections, access to my world. Nobody ever just wants me, just values me for who I am rather than what I can provide. You were different. You saw me. I wanted you. Just you. The past tense wasn't lost on either of them, a grammatical shift that carried the weight of everything changing, of possibility, transforming into impossibility, right before her eyes. James stood pacing the small living room that could have fit inside her mansion's foyer a dozen times, over the spatial reminder of just how different their worlds were, adding physical dimension to the emotional distance opening between them. "And now, I don't know. I feel like I don't even know who you are. Everything I thought I knew was filtered through this lie you were maintaining. How can I trust anything else you've told me? How do I know what's real and what's just another carefully constructed fiction? I'm the same person who pushed Lily on the swings, who discussed Baldwin with you for hours, who kissed you on this couch." Elena's voice carried desperation she rarely allowed herself to feel, much less show. "The money doesn't change who I am inside. It's just resources, circumstances. The core of me is the same." but it changes everything between us." James's words came out sharper than she'd ever heard from him, frustration finally breaking through his usually patient demeanor. "You live in a world I can't even imagine. Private jets and emergency board meetings in Asia. Meanwhile, I'm saving up for Lily's college fund, worrying about whether I can afford the rent increase next year. Those aren't just different circumstances, they're different realities entirely. Those things don't matter to me. They should. They're reality. My reality." His emphasis on the possessive made Elena flinch, the implicit separation clear in those two words. "And what about Lily? She's already attached to you. What happens when your world pulls you away again? When you disappear for weeks at a time with barely a phone call because some market somewhere is doing something that requires the personal attention of a billionaire CEO?" The question struck at Elena's deepest fear, the one she'd been avoiding since that first dinner at Meridian, that she couldn't be both Elena Martinez and Tori, that choosing one meant abandoning the other, and that Lily would be the casualty of her failure to bridge that impossible gap. Before she could formulate an answer that might salvage something from this wreckage, Lily appeared in the doorway, her small voice cutting through the tension like a knife through fabric. "Daddy, why are you mad at Tori?" The shift in James was immediate, his expression transforming from anger to protective gentleness so quickly it gave Elena whiplash. "I'm not mad, sweetheart. We're just having a grown-up talk about some complicated things." "You sound mad. Is Tori leaving again?" The fear in that question broke something in Elena that had remained intact through decades of business warfare and personal isolation. This child, who'd already lost her mother, who'd opened her heart with the trust only the young possessed, now faced the prospect of losing another woman she'd let herself care about, another adult who'd proven unreliable when it mattered most. Elena knelt to Lily's level, meeting those worried eyes with as much honesty as she could manage. "I need to go home now, but I'm not disappearing again. I promise you that, sweetheart." Lily held out her pinky finger with solemn ceremony, the gesture carrying more weight than any contract Elena had ever signed. "Pinky promise." Elena linked her finger with the child's, the physical connection feeling more binding than shareholder agreements or board resolutions. Pinky promise. As she left the apartment, the weight of what she might lose pressed down on her chest until breathing felt difficult, each inhalation requiring conscious effort. She'd finally found someone who saw her for herself, and her own secrets might have destroyed everything. The town car waited at the curb sanctuary and prison simultaneously. Where to Ms. Martinez? The name felt like accusation after hours of being Tori, after months of pretending the billions didn't exist. "Home, please, James." She sank into the leather seat, and for the first time in years, Elena Martinez allowed herself to cry. Real tears, not the careful moisture she sometimes employed in negotiations for effect, but genuine grief for something precious slipping through her fingers. She'd built an empire, revolutionized an industry, accumulated wealth beyond measure. But sitting alone in the back of her luxury car watching Brooklyn disappear behind tinted windows, she had never felt poorer. For 3 days, Elena buried herself in work with an intensity that alarmed even Sarah, who'd witnessed her boss's legendary dedication through crises that would have broken lesser executives. She didn't leave Martinez Tower sleeping on the couch in her office when exhaustion finally overwhelmed her. Showering in the executive gym, living on coffee, and the determination that had built her company from nothing into a global force. Employees scurried out of her path in the hallways, her expression harder than usual. Every meeting conducted with a precision that bordered on cruel. She cut through excuses like a scalpel through tissue, her patience for incompetence or hesitation reduced to absolute zero. The crisis in Singapore had been contained, supply chains restructured, investors placated, but the work provided no satisfaction. Just numbing distraction from the void James's absence had created. You haven't left the building in 72 hours. Sarah placed fresh coffee on Elena's desk concern, etching her normally professional features in ways that suggested she was approaching this conversation as friend rather than employee. There's dedication. And then there's whatever this is. You're running yourself into the ground. Elena stared at market projections without seeing them, numbers and graphs blurring into meaningless patterns. Anything from legal about the Blake patent challenge. The deflection was transparent, but Sarah didn't immediately call her on it, recognizing the evasion for what it was. Desperate avoidance of topics too painful to address directly. Nothing new. They're confident his breakthrough won't affect our core technology patents. His manufacturing claims don't hold up under scrutiny. She paused, weighing her next words carefully. But that's not why you're camping out in your office, is it? This isn't about Ethan Blake or supply chains or market share. Elena's fingers stilled on her keyboard, the pretense of productivity collapsing under Sarah's gentle persistence. I met someone, and I lied to him about who I am. Now he knows, and I might have lost him. Lost both of them, actually, him and his daughter. The admission felt like surrender vulnerability she never allowed herself, except perhaps with Sarah, who'd been with her since the early days before the billions made everyone either supplicant or competitor. Before success had isolated her so completely that genuine human connection became nearly impossible. The man from the restaurant, the one with the little girl. Sarah's perceptiveness shouldn't have surprised Elena after 6 years of working together, but it still caught her off guard. How did you know you've taken more personal time in the last 3 months than in the previous 5 years combined? And you smile at your phone when certain messages come through, this secret little smile I've never seen before. It doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. Sarah's observation highlighted just how transparent Elena's feelings had been, how poorly she'd hidden the joy James and Lily brought into her carefully controlled existence. He's a teacher, high school English and wrestling coach, lives in Brooklyn with his daughter in a 2-bedroom apartment. Elena almost laughed at how absurd it sounded when spoken aloud in her executive suite, the contrast so stark it seemed designed for dramatic irony. When I'm with them, I'm just a person, not Elena Martinez, CEO of an $11 billion company. Just Tori. The diminutive felt foreign in this space where she was always Ms. Martinez, or Elena, never the casual nickname of her pre-fame life. And he found out the truth when you disappeared to Singapore. He thinks I lied because I didn't trust him. That I thought he'd try to take advantage, but it wasn't that at all. Elena's voice cracked despite her efforts at composure. I just wanted to be normal for once. To have someone see me, not my bank account or my influence or what I could do for their career. He treated me like I mattered for who I was, not what I owned. Sarah finished the thought, for her understanding implicit in her tone. To have someone see you, not your resources. How do I fix this? The question hung in the air, a plea for guidance from a woman who always had answers, who'd built solutions from nothing and turned obstacles into opportunities through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. Sarah considered for a moment, then offered the only wisdom that mattered, the kind of advice that couldn't be found in business school or leadership seminars. Maybe the same way you built this company, with honesty, determination, and the willingness to take a risk that matters. But first she gathered empty coffee cups from Elena's desk. Go home. Shower. You're the most powerful woman in tech, not a college student pulling an all-nighter. Show him you can be both Elena Martinez and Tori, that they're not separate people, but different facets of the same woman. The gentle admonishment broke through Elena's spiral, drawing a reluctant smile that felt foreign after 3 days of grim determination. Get out of my office before I remember I'm your boss and fire you for insubordination. You'd never fire me. I'm the only one who tells you the truth. Sarah's confidence was earned through years of loyalty and competence, the security of knowing her value exceeded any momentary annoyance she might cause. Elena watched her leave, then pulled up her phone and stared at the message thread with James, 3 days of silence stretching between his last terse reply and the present moment. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, composing and deleting a dozen different messages before settling on simplicity. I know I asked for space, but Lily keeps asking about you. She misses Tori. The text came through as Elena was finally gathering her things to leave the office, to follow Sarah's advice about going home and attempting to rejoin humanity. Below the text, a photo of Lily holding up her first-place science fair ribbon, beaming with pride that Elena had missed witnessing firsthand because Singapore markets demanded her attention and boards needed her reassurance. Elena stared at the image, the small triumph somehow more significant than any corporate victory she'd achieved, more meaningful than quarterly earnings beats or successful product launches. She texted back after careful consideration, each word weighed for what it revealed and concealed. Tell her congratulations from me. I'm so proud of her, and I miss her too. Miss both of you, if I'm being honest. The admission felt dangerous and necessary. Truth she couldn't hold back, even knowing the risk. His response came quickly, suggesting he'd been waiting for her to reach out, hoping for contact despite the hurt and confusion. Maybe we could talk this weekend. I'm still processing everything, but Lily's been drawing pictures of you every day. Seems wrong to keep you apart because of adult complications we created. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by anxiety and the awareness that talking meant explaining, that explanation meant revealing the full extent of her wealth and influence. That revelation might drive the final wedge between them. Saturday. Your place or mine? She sent it before she could overthink, then followed quickly with another message. That came out wrong. I meant, where would you be comfortable meeting? I don't want to assume or push. His response made her smile for the first time in days, the first genuine expression of joy since she'd left his apartment in tears. Neutral territory might be best. The playground where we went that first weekend. Lily would love it, and maybe being in public will keep us from yelling at each other. The self-deprecating humor suggested he was trying that, despite everything he was willing to give this another chance. Perfect. I'll be there. No driver, no security, no CEO trappings. Just me, I promise. It was a commitment to herself as much as to him, though she knew her security team would be watching from distance whether she acknowledged it or not. Some risks she couldn't take, some exposures she couldn't allow. Not when her profile made her a target for everything from kidnapping to corporate espionage. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool, perfect autumn weather that felt designed for new beginnings or final endings, depending on how the next few hours unfolded. Elena dressed with the same care she'd taken for that first playground visit 3 months ago. Jeans, simple sweater flats that made her feel small and vulnerable in ways her usual heels never did. The woman in the mirror looked softer than the CEO whose face graced magazine covers, more uncertain and somehow more real, stripped of the armor she wore in boardrooms and investor presentations. She dismissed her driver taking a rideshare that dropped her 2 blocks from the playground, the walk allowing her to shed the last vestiges of Elena Martinez and step into Tori's skin one more time. She spotted them immediately when the playground came into view. James pushing Lily on the swings, the girl's laughter carrying across the morning air with the kind of pure joy that seemed impossible in Elena's world of calculated risks and strategic positioning. Her heart seized at the sight, longing and fear mixing in equal measure. Lily saw her first jumping from the swing with reckless abandon and racing across the playground like Elena was returning from war rather than a 3-day absence. You came back. I knew you would. The small body crashed into Elena's legs with enough force to stagger her. Daddy said you might be too busy with your important job, but I told him you promised and you don't break promises. You're not a promise breaker, are you, Tori? The question carried weight beyond its simple phrasing. A child's need for reassurance that adults could be trusted, that the world contained reliability and constancy. Elena knelt, enveloping Lily in an embrace that felt like absolution and condemnation simultaneously. I'm not a promise breaker, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I missed your science fair. Tell me everything about it. Did your volcano work perfectly? It was amazing. The lava went everywhere, and Mrs. Patterson said it was the best eruption she'd ever seen. And I won first place and got this ribbon, and everyone clapped. Lily's words tumbled over each other in her excitement, the ribbon clutched in her small hand like a trophy, more valuable than any business award Elena had ever received. That's incredible. I'm so proud of you. You worked so hard on that project. James approached more slowly, hands in pockets expression, guarded but not hostile, careful neutrality that suggested he was trying as hard as she was to find a path through this minefield of hurt feelings and broken trust. Thank you for suggesting this, for letting me see her. The gratitude felt wrong, Elena thought. She shouldn't need permission to see a child she'd grown to love, but the reality was that James controlled access to his daughter, and rightfully so, given Elena's deceptions. They spent the next hour moving through the playground's attractions, a strange family unit bound by tentative reconciliation and a child's unquestioning acceptance. To outside observers, they might have appeared as any normal family enjoying a weekend outing, not a teacher, a billionaire, and a child navigating the wreckage of adult complications. As Lily ran off to join other children building elaborate structures in the sandbox, James and Elena settled on a bench watching from distance. She seems happy. Kids are resilient in ways adults forget how to be, but they also notice everything, process it differently, maybe, but they see the important parts we try to hide. James turned slightly toward her, his expression carrying the weight of sleepless nights spent processing revelations that upended his understanding of the woman he'd fallen for. Last night she asked me if you were going to be her new mommy. No pressure or anything. His attempt at humor barely masked the seriousness beneath the acknowledgement that Lily's heart was invested in ways that made this conversation about more than just two adults figuring out their relationship. Elena's breath caught the question, highlighting stakes she'd tried not to think about too directly. What did you tell her? That you and I are still getting to know each other. That being someone's mommy is a very special job that people need to be ready for. His eyes met hers directly, searching for something he needed to find before continuing. Then she asked if you have enough money to buy us a house with a backyard for a dog. And I realized I'm raising a tiny negotiator who understands more about our situation than I gave her credit for. The joke broke tension, drawing genuine laughter from both of them, but when the laughter faded, reality remained heavy between them. James's voice lowered, became more serious than she'd heard except during their confrontation 3 days ago. Look, I need to know something. Is this us worth fighting for to you? Not just a novelty break from boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, not just slumming it with regular people to feel normal for a while. Because Lily's already attached and I can't let her heart get broken if this is just an exciting detour that ends when you get bored with playing at normal life. The question cut to the core of Elena's intentions, her commitment, her understanding of what building a life with James and Lily would truly require. She'd faced hostile takeovers and market crashes with unflinching determination, but this question demanded different courage, emotional honesty without strategic calculation, vulnerability without the safety net of wealth to fall back on. When I'm with you and Lily, I feel like myself for the first time in years, not Elena Martinez CEO, but just me, the person I might have been if success hadn't required becoming someone harder, colder, more isolated. Her hands gripped the bench-edge knuckles white with the force of emotion she was trying to contain. This isn't a novelty, James. It's a revelation. It's discovering that the life I built, as impressive as it looks from the outside, was hollow at the center, because I'd sacrificed connection for achievement. And yes, it's absolutely worth fighting for, even if that fight looks different from any corporate battle I've waged. James studied her face, searching for performance or calculation, the kind of strategic positioning that came naturally to people in her world. Finding none, some tension left his shoulders, but doubt remained visible in the set of his jaw. Okay. Then if we're going to do this, really do this, we need a plan. Not just for the immediate crisis, but for long term. How we handle the press, how we protect Lily, how we navigate the billion-dollar elephant that's going to be in every room we're in together. The shift was subtle but significant, from you to we, from individual crisis management to collaborative problem solving. Elena felt something loosen in her chest, hope threading through the anxiety that had gripped her for days. My company's PR team will want to issue sanitized statements, control the narrative with carefully crafted messages designed to minimize disruption. But this isn't just my story to manage. What do you want, James? What would make you and Lily feel secure? His surprise at being consulted was evident, a reminder of how differently their worlds operated. How decisions in her sphere typically flowed from the top down rather than through genuine collaboration. I want Lily's face kept completely out of the media. Non-negotiable. I want her school left alone so she can have a normal education without photographers camping outside. I want her to have as normal a childhood as possible regardless of who her father is dating. His protective priorities were clear and absolute, drawing boundaries that Elena immediately recognized as reasonable and necessary. And I want the truth told, not some manufactured narrative that makes this into a fairy tale or a scandal. If we're going to be under scrutiny, at least let it be for something real, for an actual relationship, rather than whatever story the media wants to create. The authenticity of his request resonated with something long buried in Elena: weariness, with carefully crafted public personas, with strategic omissions and calculated revelations designed to maximize advantage while minimizing vulnerability. The corporate playbook suddenly seemed hollow compared to James's straightforward integrity. I can work with that. Strategic paths formed in her mind, not for market domination, but for protecting what mattered most. No posed photos, no exclusive interviews. Simple statement acknowledging we're in a relationship, requesting privacy, especially regarding Lily. Enhanced security for the school and your apartment building, discreet but effective, invisible to daily life, but ready if needed. James nodded slowly, processing the necessary adjustments to their lives that came with dating someone whose wealth made her newsworthy. And what about Ethan? Your company, that emergency board meeting you mentioned. His awareness of her professional challenges touched her deeply. The recognition that he was equally concerned about her world as she was about his. The balance she'd never achieved with anyone else, because she'd never let anyone close enough to try. Elena's phone vibrated against her leg, Sarah's name lighting the screen through the fabric of her pocket. The corporate crisis wouldn't wait, regardless of her personal revelations, wouldn't pause for reconciliation or relationship repair. I need to take this. Work emergency. She answered professional mode, engaging automatically despite the personal setting. What's the latest? The news poured through in Sarah's efficient summary. Ethan had secured tentative support from 2 board members, using Elena's personal distractions as evidence she was losing focus, letting relationship drama interfere with the strategic vision that had built the company. Stock had dipped 3 points in after-hours trading, following rumors about leadership instability. Institutional investors were calling, demanding reassurance that she was still fully committed. Elena listened, calculating moves and counter-moves with practiced efficiency, even as part of her mind remained with James, watching his face as he observed her shift into CEO mode. Have legal, prepare documentation of Ethan's blackmail attempt. Yes, it was blackmail when he threatened to leak those photos unless I backed off the Jensen project. We'll demonstrate this is personal vindictiveness, not legitimate business strategy. She continued, issuing directives with calm authority. Schedule one-on-ones with each board member before tomorrow's meeting. I'll handle them personally. Remind them why they invested in me and this company in the first place. And Sarah, I want a full competitive analysis of Blake Technologies' manufacturing capabilities on my desk by tonight. If Ethan wants to play games, let's show the board exactly how weak his position actually is. The decisive CEO was fully present even as her eyes remained on James, aware of the cognitive dissonance of watching her operate in her natural element. Ending the call, she found him watching her with new expression, not judgment or disapproval, but curiosity, mixed with something that might have been admiration. So, that's Elena Martinez in action. The difference is illuminating. His observation held no criticism, merely acknowledgement of the duality she navigated daily, the code switching between worlds that required constant mental adjustment. Not so different from watching you coach, I imagine. Different arena, same leadership principles. Clear, vision, decisive action, protecting your team. James considered this, the comparison seeming to satisfy something in him. I need to handle this crisis, James. Ethan's using my relationship with you as leverage to attack my company, weaponizing my personal life against my professional credibility. And I won't let him hurt either the people or the organization I care about, the personal and political, intertwined as always. James's smile held unexpected warmth, the kind of understanding that suggested he saw parallels in his own world of school politics and administrative battles. So what's the plan? Martinez? His use of her surname carried no mockery, only acceptance of this essential aspect of her identity. Recognition that Elena Martinez, the CEO, was as real and important as Tori, the woman who pushed his daughter on swings. She felt something shift between them, a bridge forming, rather than a wall, the possibility of integration, rather than separation. I need to go to the office, prepare for tomorrow's board meeting. The timing couldn't be worse for us, but the timing is never good for crises. They happen when they happen, and you deal with them. She hesitated, unused to having personal commitments influence professional decisions, to considering someone else's needs before charging into battle. But Sarah's right, I've been living at the office for 3 days, and that's not sustainable. I'll go in for a few hours, handle what only I can handle, then come back. To you if you'll let me. Go. James's permission came without hesitation, without resentment at her divided attention. Lily and I will head home, lie low for the weekend. His practical acceptance of her responsibilities touched her deeply, the gift of understanding, without requiring apology. Just keep us in the loop. No more disappearing acts without explanation. The reasonable request highlighted her previous failing, the pattern of vanishing, without adequate communication, that had damaged their trust. I promise. Regular updates, no matter how busy things get. And once this immediate crisis is contained, we'll figure out a more sustainable balance. I can't keep running myself into the ground, and I can't keep prioritizing work over everything else. Something has to change. The commitment felt momentous, a declaration of intent to integrate her worlds rather than maintain rigid separation between them. As she prepared to leave, Lily abandoned her sandbox construction project and ran over, arms outstretched for a hug that Elena met with fierce tenderness. Are you coming to our house later for movies? The hopeful question carried weight, a child testing relationship reliability after previous disappointment, seeking reassurance that adults could be counted on. Elena knelt to her level honesty, trumping easy promises that might provide temporary comfort but risk future betrayal. Not tonight, sweetheart. I have important work to finish, a meeting I have to prepare for. But I'll call before bedtime if that's okay with your dad, and maybe we can do something special tomorrow afternoon once my meeting is done. The balanced response neither abandoned responsibilities nor dismissed Lily's desires, attempted to model the integration she was trying to achieve. Lily's small face grew serious, processing with surprising maturity for a 6-year-old. Is it because of the bad man Daddy told me about? The one trying to take your company? Elena glanced at James, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected awareness, surprised he'd shared even simplified versions of her professional challenges. He nodded slightly, encouraging honesty at an appropriate level. Yes, Lily. Someone's trying to take something important from me, and I need to stop him. Just like if someone had tried to take your science fair ribbon, you'd stand up for yourself, right? You wouldn't just let them have it because fighting seemed hard. Lily nodded vigorously, moral certainty blazing in her young eyes. You should tell him that's not nice and he needs to stop being mean. That's what Mrs. Patterson says. Use your words and tell people when they're being mean. The straightforward childhood justice system drew genuine laughter from both adults, momentary relief cutting through the tension. I'll definitely tell him that. You're absolutely right. I need to use my words and tell him to stop being mean to my company. Elena hugged Lily tightly, then stood to face James, their eyes holding a silent conversation. Concern, resolve, connection, despite challenges ahead. James stepped forward, pulling her into a quick embrace that surprised her with its warmth. Go save your company. We'll be here when you're done. And Elena. His use of her real name felt significant acknowledgement of her complete identity. Don't let Ethan win because you're distracted by iOS. Handle your business with the same focus that built that empire. We're not going anywhere. His support offered despite his own reservations about her world and the complications it brought filled Elena with determination, unlike any corporate motivation she'd previously experienced. This wasn't about market share or stock prices or proving doubters wrong. This was about protecting the possibility of a future with these two people who had somehow become essential to her happiness in ways she was still learning to articulate. The night before the emergency board meeting passed in strategic blur, but different from her previous 3-day isolation. Elena worked through the night at Martinez Tower, her executive team rallying with loyalty. Ethan had clearly underestimated, but she left the building at midnight to sleep in her own bed, to prove to herself she could maintain boundaries even during crisis. By dawn, she'd spoken personally with every board member, presenting evidence of Ethan's attempted blackmail and outlining clear vision for the company's future that made his opportunistic offer appear shallow and vindictive. True to her promise, she texted James regular updates, brief but specific messages, acknowledging progress and thoughts of him and Lily that went beyond mere professional reporting. Each response from him supportive despite late hours strengthened her resolve to find sustainable balance between her worlds. This is good, he texted after her third update. Knowing what's happening makes the waiting easier. And knowing you're thinking of us means more than you probably realize. Sunday morning's emergency board meeting became the battlefield Elena had prepared for with methodical precision. Ethan's smug confidence faded as he realized the support he'd thought secured had evaporated overnight, that his whisper campaign about Elena's divided attention had backfired when she demonstrated the same strategic brilliance that had built Martinez Energy into an industry leader. Elena stood at the conference table's head, her expression carved from marble as she addressed assembled directors with controlled fury that was far more effective than shouting would have been. Blake Technologies' offer isn't about shareholder value or technological synergy or even legitimate business competition. It's about personal vendetta, about a bitter man who left me when this company was struggling and now can't accept that his lack of vision cost him everything he's trying to take by force. She activated the boardroom screen displaying time-stamped records of Ethan's communications, the attempted blackmail laid out with prosecutorial precision. The evidence speaks for itself. Ethan Blake didn't approach this board with a legitimate business proposal. He attempted to leverage personal information for corporate gain using private photographs to extort competitive concessions, a tactic that violates not only ethical standards, but potentially several laws regarding corporate espionage and blackmail. Board members' expressions shifted from concern to disapproval, not of Elena's relationship, but of Ethan's tactics, the recognition that this was personal warfare dressed up as business strategy. The chairman cleared his throat, addressing Ethan directly with the kind of cold formality that preceded permanent separation. Mr. Blake, I believe we've heard enough. Your offer is unanimously rejected. I suggest you leave before we consider legal action regarding these documented blackmail attempts, and I'd recommend you consult with your own legal counsel about the wisdom of continuing this particular vendetta. As security escorted him from the building, Ethan turned back with one final barbed desperation underlying the bravado. This isn't over, Elena. You can't have everything the company and your little makeshift family in Brooklyn. Something will break eventually. You'll have to choose. Elena met his gaze without flinching, her voice carrying across the boardroom with absolute certainty. You never understood me, Ethan. Not when we were together, not now. I don't want everything. I want what matters. And I'll protect it with every resource at my disposal, every skill I've developed, every advantage my position provides. The distinction felt profound crystallization of values that had been evolving since that first dinner with James and Lily. The recognition that success without connection was just expensive loneliness. After the board meeting concluded with unanimous support for her leadership, Elena left the tower feeling physically exhausted but mentally clear. The crisis averted, but the larger challenge remaining, truly integrating her worlds, being both Elena Martinez, tech visionary, and Tori, the woman James and Lily had come to care for. When Elena arrived at James's apartment that afternoon, keeping her promise about doing something special with Lily, she found the girl waiting by the window, face pressed against glass in a vigil that suggested she'd been there for some time. The sight of such eager anticipation filled Elena with warmth that had nothing to do with business victories or market dominance. Lily flung open the door before Elena could knock. You won. Did you tell the bad man to stop being mean? Her childish understanding of corporate warfare made Elena smile, despite exhaustion that went bone deep. I did exactly that. And guess what? It worked. The other grown-ups agreed with me that he was being mean, so he had to leave and can't bother us anymore. She followed Lily into the apartment where James was preparing late lunch in the small kitchen, the domesticity of the scene Sunday afternoon. Cooking apartment filled with a child's artwork and the comfortable clutter of actual life striking Elena as infinitely more appealing than her immaculate mansion's sterile perfection. James looked up from chopping vegetables, his expression warm but still carrying traces of caution that would take time to fully dissolve. Congratulations. CEO. The board stood with you, I take it. His question sought confirmation, but also probed her emotional state after confrontation, the kind of attentiveness she wasn't accustomed to receiving. Unanimously, Ethan underestimated how transparent his motives were and how loyal my team is when leadership actually deserves that loyalty. She settled at the kitchen counter, watching James's confident movements around the small space, the ease with which he navigated domestic tasks that she'd always outsourced to staff. But this isn't the end. Ethan won't give up easily. Wounded pride makes people do stupid things. And there will be other challenges, other crises that demand my attention at inconvenient times. Being with me comes with complications I can minimize but not eliminate. Life comes with complications. Elena, James's use of her full name felt significant acceptance of her complete identity rather than just the carefully curated portions he'd first been shown. The question isn't whether there will be challenges, but whether they're worth facing together. Whether what we're building is strong enough to weather the storms that will inevitably come. The simple wisdom struck deeply, offering a different framework than the cost-benefit analysis Elena typically applied to every decision. Not whether difficulties could be eliminated through superior strategy and resources, but whether connection was valuable enough to make them worthwhile, whether love justified the work required to sustain it. I think they are. Worth facing together. Elena's response came without calculation, honest assessment from a woman learning to value different metrics than she'd used for 3 decades. But we need better approach than crisis management. Something sustainable for all 3 of us that doesn't require me to choose between you and my responsibilities, that integrates rather than separates. James nodded, setting plates on the small dining table where Lily was already seated, swinging her legs with barely contained energy. I've been thinking about that too. We need boundaries, structure, communication that's honest even when honesty is uncomfortable. Like any family figuring out how to function together. His casual use of family to include her sent a wave of emotion through Elena that threatened to undermine her carefully maintained composure. She'd built an empire but never expected to be part of something as simple and profound as this: shared meals every day concerns the mundane magic of belonging somewhere that had nothing to do with net worth or market capitalization. Over following weeks, they developed systems for navigating their complex relationship with the same methodical approach Elena applied to business challenges. She restructured her executive team, delegating operational decisions that had previously consumed her attention, creating space that had never existed before. She instituted family hours when her phone was silenced, except for genuine emergencies, learned to distinguish between crises that required her immediate attention and problems her capable team could solve without her. She attended Lily's school events, helped coach her science fair projects with genuine enthusiasm rather than obligation, learned to be present in moments without her mind constantly calculating next moves in corporate chess games. James, too, made adjustments, accepting enhanced security measures without resentment once Elena explained the realities of her profile, adjusting to occasional public recognition when they ventured into Manhattan rather than staying safely anonymous in Brooklyn. He even attended a Martinez Energy function where he charmed board members with his unpretentious intelligence and genuine interest in people, rather than their portfolios. His comfort with being the only person in the room without a net worth calculated in millions, making him paradoxically more impressive than the wealthy, who competed for status through subtle signals of expensive watches and custom suits. The wealth disparity remained a sensitive issue, requiring ongoing navigation and explicit communication to prevent resentment from accumulating in silence. When James insisted on contributing to household expenses proportional to his income, Elena recognized it as a matter of dignity rather than mathematics, and respected his need to maintain self-respect within their relationship. They compromised on a complex formula that allowed him to contribute meaningfully without bankrupting himself, that acknowledged his need to provide while accepting the reality that her resources made certain expenses irrelevant. "You're not a kept man," Elena assured him during one particularly difficult conversation about money. "You're my partner, and partners contribute what they can in ways that matter. Sometimes that's money. Sometimes it's time. Sometimes it's just showing up and being present. You do all three." 4 months after Ethan's failed takeover attempt, as autumn deepened toward winter, Elena invited James and Lily to her office on a Saturday morning, the first time they'd visited her professional domain, seen her in the environment where she wielded the power and influence she'd been hiding from them. Lily marveled at the floor-to-ceiling windows and the executive toys on Elena's desk, while James observed the command center of her empire with quiet assessment that suggested he was revising his understanding of exactly what she'd built. "I've been working on something." Elena displayed a presentation on her private conference room screen. Nervousness uncharacteristic, but revealing how much their opinion mattered, how their approval had become more valuable than any board vote. "It's a restructuring plan for Martinez Energy leadership that I'm proposing at next month's board meeting." She explained the concept of appointing Sarah as chief operating officer while retaining her position as CEO and chairwoman, creating layers of management that would handle daily operations she'd previously controlled directly. "This isn't just about us, though. That's certainly part of it. It's about building sustainability into the organization, creating institutional strength that doesn't depend entirely on me. The company shouldn't collapse if I take a vacation or prioritize family over a meeting that could be handled by someone else." James studied the organizational chart, immediately grasping implications that went beyond corporate structure to personal commitment. "You're creating space, delegating daily operations while maintaining strategic control, building a company that can function without you micromanaging every decision." His understanding, without need for detailed explanation, demonstrated how well he'd come to know her, how carefully he'd listened during their conversations about her work despite his lack of background in business. "The business press will say you're losing focus, that your priorities have shifted away from the company. They'll question whether you still have the hunger that built Martinez Energy. Let them." Elena's dismissal of potential criticism surprised even herself. The recognition that external validation had become less important than internal alignment with her values. I know my value to the company and beyond it. I've proven everything I needed to prove about my capabilities. Now I'm choosing what kind of life I want to live, what legacy I want to leave beyond quarterly earnings and patent portfolios. Do you think it's a mistake? She genuinely wanted his opinion, respected him enough to not expect blind support for decisions that would fundamentally alter how she spent her time and energy. James considered the question seriously, giving it the thoughtful attention he brought to all important matters rather than offering easy reassurance. I think it's evolution. Growth. You built something incredible, proved you could compete with anyone and win. Now you're choosing to build something else, a life that includes the company, but isn't consumed by it. That takes different kind of courage than the drive that builds empires. He gestured toward Lily, spinning in Elena's executive chair, blissfully unaware of the significant conversation happening nearby. Some things matter more than others. The trick is figuring out which is which and having the courage to act on that knowledge rather than just acknowledging it abstractly. The restructuring announcement generated exactly the business press speculation James had predicted. Articles questioning Elena's commitment and hunger, suggesting she'd lost her edge by allowing personal priorities to dilute her professional focus. But stock held steady as investors recognized the strength of her executive team and the soundness of her strategic vision. The market ultimately caring more about results than the CEO's work-life balance philosophy. Elena found herself with something she hadn't experienced in years. Margin in her scheduled breathing room between obligations, the mental space to think about questions beyond quarterly strategy and competitive positioning. She attended a wrestling match where James coached, watched him work with teenage boys who needed male role models who combined strength with emotional intelligence, saw him transform aggressive energy into disciplined effort with patience that impressed her more than any corporate negotiation she'd witnessed. Late spring softened into summer as Elena invited James and Lily to dinner at her mansion, not their usual casual visit, but something more formal, more purposeful that suggested significance beyond ordinary meals. The mansion had undergone subtle transformations over preceding months. Formal spaces softened with comfortable furniture that invited actual-use walls featuring Lily's framed creations alongside sophisticated art pieces. A bedroom converted into a library filled with James's beloved classics, and a room designed specifically for Lily that Elena had kept secret until this moment. Lily raced through familiar rooms with proprietary enthusiasm, heading straight for the garden where Elena had arranged special surprise. James followed more slowly, noting changes with quiet appreciation that suggested he understood their significance. "You've been busy. What's the occasion?" Elena led him toward garden, uncharacteristic nervousness evident in the way she couldn't quite meet his eyes directly. "I wanted to ask you both something. Something important that I've been thinking about for weeks." The garden glowed with fairy lights strung through trees with professional precision, creating magical atmosphere that drew audible gasp from Lily when she spotted it. Small table had been set for three, complete with star-shaped pasta and chocolate lava cake identical to that first night's dessert at Meridian. The symbolic recreation of their first meeting wasn't lost on James, whose expression softened with recognition of the gesture's meaning. Elena knelt to Lily's level, conscious of including her in this significant moment, recognizing that what she was about to propose affected the child as much as it affected the adults. "I wanted to ask you and your dad a very important question. The past 6 months have been happiest of my life because of you two. I never knew what I was missing until that night you both sat at my table at the restaurant." James's expression grew serious as he recognized gravity of the moment, moving closer to place supportive hand on Lily's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity that made them a unit facing her together. Elena continued addressing both of them equally, because this decision required consent from father and daughter alike. I've been thinking about how much time we spend going back and forth between our homes, how complicated our schedules get coordinating between Brooklyn and Manhattan, how we're building one life across two spaces that don't quite connect. Her carefully prepared speech faltered slightly, as emotion threatened her composure. What I'm trying to ask is, would you consider moving in here, making this your home too? The question hung in evening air, more consequential than any merger proposal or acquisition offer Elena had ever extended, carrying weight that had nothing to do with financial calculations and everything to do with emotional vulnerability. Lily looked to her father instinctively, understanding that while her opinion mattered, this adult decision required his judgment and approval. James's expression remained unreadable for a moment that stretched Elena's nerves to breaking point, his silence communicating the seriousness with which he was considering the proposal and its implications. Then he asked the question that cut to heart of everything, the challenge that would determine whether this could work. Why here? Why not us, offering you space in our apartment, making room for you in our world, rather than us joining yours? The query wasn't confrontational, but essential testing, whether Elena truly understood what integration meant, whether her proposal stemmed from genuine desire for shared life or merely convenient absorption of them into her existing world structure. Elena had anticipated this crucial challenge, had spent hours thinking through her answer, because she knew it would reveal her true motivations. I considered that, and seriously. But your apartment is near Lily's school, your work, the community you've built in Brooklyn over the years. Those connections matter, that stability is important for her development. This place, she gestured to the mansion behind them, is just a house I bought to impress people who never really mattered, to prove something to critics who've already moved on to judging someone else. She continued, building her case with the same careful logic she'd use for a business presentation, but infused with emotion that made it personal rather than transactional. It only started feeling like home when you two began spending time here, when Lily's artwork went up on the walls and your books filled the library, and suddenly all this space had purpose beyond showing off wealth. I'm not asking you to join my world. I'm asking if we can build something new together, using the resources we all bring, your wisdom and stability and community connections, my resources and space, and whatever else I can contribute. The distinction resonated with James, whose expression softened as he processed her words and the vulnerability underneath them. And if I said this is too much too soon, that we need more time before making this kind of commitment? His question tested boundaries, explored Elena's flexibility, rather than rejecting her proposal outright, checking whether she could accept his timeline rather than imposing her own through the subtle coercion wealth sometimes enabled. Then we find another solution, a new place altogether that belongs to both of us, equally, or more time at your apartment with me, as the one adjusting to smaller spaces, or whatever feels right to both of us. Elena's immediate willingness to adapt demonstrated growth. James could clearly recognize the woman who'd hidden her identity for months now, offering genuine partnership rather than benevolent dictatorship disguised as generosity. I'm not attached to this house, James. I'm attached to you and Lily. The space is just details we can figure out together as partners making joint decisions. Lily, who had been following this adult exchange with unusual patience that suggested she understood its importance, finally interjected with characteristic directness that cut through complexity to reach emotional core. Does this mean Tori would be with us every day? No more saying goodbye at night. Her question distilled the proposal to its essential element: consistent presence rather than intermittent visits, the security of knowing someone would be there rather than wondering if they might disappear again. That's the idea, sweetheart. If you and your dad want that too. I want to be part of your family, to be here for school mornings and bedtime stories and everything in between, not just special occasions and weekends. The vulnerability of the moment, placing her deepest hopes in the hands of a 6-year-old and the man she'd grown to love, contrasted sharply with the calculated risks of her business world, where outcomes could be predicted and controlled through superior strategy and resources. Lily's face lit with immediate certainty, the kind of uncomplicated conviction only children possessed before life taught them caution and self-protection. Yes, we should all live together and be a family. Her enthusiastic endorsement, while heartwarming, didn't distract Elena from James's still thoughtful expression, the recognition that his decision carried greater complexity. Adult concerns about independence and identity and the power dynamics inherent in their unusual situation, where wealth disparities created inevitable imbalances. James stepped away slightly, creating space for careful consideration, his body language suggesting internal deliberation rather than rejection. You know what concerns me most about this proposal? Not the wealth difference, or the media attention, or even the practical adjustments of combining households. It's that Lily's getting attached to the idea of us as a permanent family, and we haven't actually discussed what that means long-term beyond living arrangements. The observation cut to the heart of unspoken hopes and fears between them, the recognition that they had carefully navigated the integration of their daily lives, but sidestepped explicit conversations about future commitment, about whether this relationship was heading toward marriage or just extended cohabitation without deeper binding. You're right, and I should have started with the more important question, instead of leading with logistics.